40 hours, a conservative estimate of how long it would take you to complete a playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077 and its expansion, Phantom Liberty. It only makes sense that you will look for an ending that both justifies the time investment as well as do justice to the choices that V made throughout. And from bittersweet fairy tale to dystopian nightmare and all the shades in between, the game has you covered. But after experiencing them all, the one that stayed with me isn't the most dramatic, nor the most heroic. It's the one that mirrors how we would actually think and the choices we would make when the pressure is real. We are about to find out why The Tower isn't the flashiest ending, but the one that feels the closest to how we actually make decisions. And to do that, we need to tap into Valerie's mind. The Tower is the less heroic, less spectacular, and less video game ending of Cyberpunk 2077. And it is also the one that represents us best as humans. To sell you on this, I will need to set a core assumption, one that will guide this thesis all the way to the end. Valerie only knows what she knows at that moment. And if we evaluate Valerie's choices using information that she doesn't have, we are cheating. But I will also need to set a framework, a sequence of events and actions that will demonstrate that the tower naturally emerges from V's decision-making process. And where better to start, if not in a rundown hotel room in West Pacifica?
You wanted to know.
Hotel Pistis Sofia. Valerie has just finished talking to Johnny. He brought her here after the latest blackout caused by the relic. At this point, she knows 3 things. The relic transformation is irreversible. Hellman made that clear. The search for Evelyn led to halt, but to get her help, she needs to reach the Mikoshi. And Hanako, well, getting Arasaka to help the thief that stole their most coveted asset seems unreasonable. At least, every solution is distant, vague, or dangerous. And time is not on her side. And it is in this context that a mysterious caller would become V's best shot at survival.
V? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, whoever you are.
Good, it worked. My name is Somi. Just call me Songbird, though. I know who you are, know your situation, your problem. And I can save your life.
All right, Songbird. Got my full attention.
Glad to hear that. You must have questions, and I'll answer them in due course, shortly. But first, I need you to get to that swollen appendix of Night City called Dogtown.
Fine. No clue what I'm stepping into, but no risk, no reward.
Thank you. I appreciate this, truly. Dogtown's main gate. Be there as soon as you can. I'll make contact again then.
This is one elaborate haze. Or a fucking lifeline.
This is the first decisional crossroad of this journey, and following our rule, trusting Songbird seems logical, or at least worth a try. And when she first manifests herself, by phasing out in an instant the presence that haunted V for the past weeks, it is clear that she's a powerful player. Besides, she also employs a persuading tactic. Like V, she's on borrowed time. We have the same condition, same urgency, same fear. By all intents and purposes, this is our best shot. After the first contact, the plot of Phantom Liberty follows its course. Encountering President Myers of the NUSA reinforces the idea that Somi is an influential character, much like Hanako, and of similar power as Alt. With a small detail, she's willing to help. The story unfolds as Songbird goes missing, likely captured by Dogtown ruler Kurt Hansen. V meets up with former FIA agent Solomon Reed, and together with fellow agent Alena Xenakis, they form a plan to rescue Somi. Reed brings something new to the table: structure, resources. But the deeper V gets into it, the harder it becomes to ignore how unstable everything around Songbird really is. Reed reveals that Somi was the one who burned him years ago. There's tension between the two, an untold story. Is this really a rescue mission, or something else entirely? Valerie only knows what she knows at that moment. And what she gathered is that there's more to Reed and Songbird than what she's being led to believe. And the doubt grows stronger when we first meet Somi in person, because the way she presents herself doesn't fully line up. And this is a strong reality check Phantom Liberty throws us. Songbird appears very different from what she's been projecting to be, heavily modified, visibly, deliberately transformed. The Somi that we agreed to help, the one who said, "We are the same," looks nothing like the person standing in that ballroom. The chrome is a visual confession. She has a second face. She always did. On one thing though, she was honest. Songbird is dying, just like we. And buried beneath Dogtown, there's something that could change that. One thing that, supposedly, could save them both.
Really need to go now, V. I'm counting on you.
Songbird. And she's gone.
On the other hand, confidence in Reed and the NUSA system begins to tremble. Songbird isn't the only one with skeletons in her closet, and the cracks in the glass become very apparent during the capture of Emmerich and Aurore Cassel. Right after the abduction of the twins, a quick, very missable scene plays out.
Whoa. What in the fuck? Fuck! You wiped them!
What'd you think we would do? Bind their hands with duct tape, shove socks in their mouths, and wait for them to wriggle free and call for help?
Now it is clear to V what Reed and the NUSA would be content to do to get Songbird back. They treat people like instruments, tools meant to be used and to be discarded once they're not useful anymore. This scene is the second decisional crossroad of this journey, and a potential exit point for V. But walking away now would mean going back to where she started. Uncertainty, no clear path forward. In other words, the more we invest into something, the harder it becomes to walk away from it. The doubt will keep building up, eating away at V just like the relic, until we reach the climax. Firestarter is the moment where the two competing agendas finally collide, and V is forced to pick a side. Betray Reed or betray Songbird.
V, thank you. Really. Thank you for being here.
I'd like to take a moment to analyze this scene. Songbird, both physically and digitally in front of V. Alex and Hansen, two symbols of oppression looming over from the balcony. Between her and all of them, the neural matrix, Valerie's way out of this nightmare. Everything in this scene reinforces the same pattern we've seen so far. Songbird is close, eye to eye, communicating on a deeper level. Alex and Reed are distant, acting superior. Valerie only knows what she knows at that moment, and what she knows, or what she's led to believe by the environment, is that Somi feels like the one to trust.
Just a little more. Okay, your turn. It's ready for the access codes.
I'm with you, Somi.
Look toward Alex. Wait for Kurt to go down.
Can do. What then?
We run. Nearly have the Matrix. Breaching stadium defenses now. It's a lot. Had to reach past the black wall.
Wait, you mean to say, like, the whole stadium?
Cutting off the lab now. Carving a path out of here for us. Defense systems are nearly primed to turn on Kurt's forces. Let Alex know.
Mm-hmm. Target down.
It's done. Stadium defenses. Hostile and online.
Hey, status. Everything all right?
Somi, you okay? What's wrong?
The Matrix, the stadium, the black wall. Just lost control for a sec. But, yeah, I'm okay now. V, you need to bolt.
Now hunted down by the NUSA, Songbird enlists V to help her flee to the moon to heal and to finally evade custody. At the spaceport, V has the chance to overhear the true nature of President Myers, Reed, and the NUSA. Another brick in the wall of distrust and another sign she made the right call. But after fending off the last of the agents, a severely weakened Songbird finally reveals the truth.
Neural Matrix V can only be used once.
What? How so?
I'd like you all to slip into V's shoes for a moment. Someone who went above and beyond, sacrificing valuable time, all the while gaining powerful new enemies, only to be left empty-handed. Worse, Night City is no stranger to backstabbers, but this time it seemed different. Songbird tapped into her mind, deceiving her into believing in a cure only to take it away at the last possible second. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start. And now, this isn't about survival anymore. It's about being lied to. And it is with this frame of mind that V is forced to take one final decision.
Let's get this shit done.
Hold up there.
Warned me about her, damn it. Turned out to be a straight con. One not worth dying for. Betrayed Myers? You? Then came my turn.
She was my friend once. Who she is today, I don't know. And I won't be the one to judge her.
Promise.
Taking you home, Somi. Taking you home.
There's anger in that choice, a sense of betrayal. But underneath it, it's still the same instinct that guided every step up to this point. Survive.
Thought about how you're gonna spend your 30 pieces of silver?
I'll be in touch.
Don't keep me waiting.
Taking Songbird to the stars means V gets nothing. No cure, no aid from the NUSA. Homo homini lupus. Every individual is at war with every other in a struggle for survival. Reed may be a puppet in the hands of a shady government, but at least he never really tricked you. Plus, he really has a cure, and the only thing he asks for is the dying body of a traitor. For once, someone follows up on the promise. A brief talk with Johnny, the possibility to text your friends, telling them you'll be out for some time. The AV arrives, one last opportunity to speak to Johnny with an open heart. At least, this is the only real goodbye. You will have time to catch up with the others in a couple of weeks.
V, can you hear me?
Think I can hear. I can talk.
Good. About time.
Reed, saw you seem different somehow. Even almost look like...
Stay at Langley long enough, it, makes you its own. I'm no exception.
I was told you got a new job, new duties, lots of them. Busy bear, no time for me.
Who said that? When?
Twice. In the AV. You weren't there.
Right, that. Wasn't any reason for me to be there then. Now? Yeah. I felt I owed you this.
Pretty nice welcome. Just missing flowers and I get wild card. Given I'm here, guess things worked out all right, huh?
Never that simple. Doc saved you. You're alive.
Hearing a big-ass butt in there.
'Cause there is one. Deep invasive work on your nervous system. To cut the engram out safely.
Telling me I wiped Johnny. Sacrificed him. For nothing.
Not for nothing. You're alive. Your neurons can no longer handle most implants. Chrome. Your brain can manage your personal link and simple code processors. But any use of a combat implant, well, it could kill you. I'm sorry, V. But the life you used to know is gone. There's, one other thing. You were out for 2 years. It's 2079.
This is the final curveball Phantom Liberty throws to Valerie. The life she once had, it doesn't exist anymore. All her friends had moved on, for better or for worse. The night city she knew doesn't exist anymore. Overrun by chaos, what's left is a shell of its former self. Sound familiar? Valerie only knows what she knows at that moment. And up to this point, I've tried to demonstrate one very specific thing. Given what V knows, her choices are never irrational. They aren't heroic, they aren't romantic, they are consistent. Every step tries to reduce uncertainty, avoid leaps of faith, and prioritize what seems concrete. In other words, V is constantly optimizing for one thing and one thing alone: staying alive. The tower, viewed from this perspective, it's not a deviation. It is the logical conclusion of that process. If the criteria is to minimize risk, avoid blind faith, and choose what really works, then the cure offered by Reed and the NUSA is the best solution. Not because it is right, but because it is the only option that still guarantees a concrete outcome. But that decision-making process, so human and so reasonable, is unable to take into account everything that is not immediately measurable. It takes into account the body, survival, the fact of carrying on. It does not take into account identity, role, or the kind of life that person was building. When V chooses to save herself, she's choosing to preserve her biological existence. And from that perspective, the tower is a success. V survives, remembers, is still conscious. If you look at it superficially, the cure worked. But what the game shows you immediately afterwards is that survival does not equate to the continuation of the life V was living. Her ability to act, her enhanced body, her standing in Night City, her relationships, the trajectory she was building, does not survive the process. It isn't destroyed in a spectacular way. It simply isn't carried forward. V remains, but the form of life she embodied is interrupted. And this is exactly the kind of thing the decision-making process had never taken into account. V never consciously chose to give all this up. That is why this ending is so striking, because it is consistent to the very end with the way we decided. There is no mistake, no misstep, no moment when V goes wrong. There is a series of sensible choices that, when added together, produce a result that none of those choices, taken individually, seemed to imply. On the one hand, you could say that V is still V. She retains memory, consciousness, and mental continuity. But if you look at it more closely, what survives is only a part of that continuity. Everything that allowed V to be that V is interrupted. There is no clean break in identity, but a sort of amputation. V continues, but in a form that no longer matches the one that made sense to her. The sequence of events described up until now, it is not the only one that can lead to the tower ending. Siding with Reed could net the same outcome, but besides being somewhat counterintuitive for what we explained so far, it is also the less preferred option overall. Looking at the Steam data for achievements, those linked to siding with Songbird have a slight but noticeable edge over those with Reed. The same data also show that King of Wands, or taking Songbird to the stars, is overall the preferred outcome, seemingly invalidating the thesis of this video. And honestly, that makes sense, because King of Wands is a beautiful ending. A selfless sacrifice to fulfill someone else's dream. The kind of choice that feels meaningful, knowing that this is still a story, still a game, and that V still has other endings waiting. There's still the main quest to complete, right? And these other endings, including those from the base game, feel meaningful because they are narratively satisfying. They have a recognizable structure, a sacrifice, a heroic act, a boss fight, a climax. Even when they are bittersweet, they are resolved. They read like stories. The tower does not. And that is the key. The other endings are more aligned with the expectations of the medium. They are video game endings. The tower isn't one. The tower stays with you not because it's the saddest or most shocking ending, but because it's the hardest to come to terms with. It offers no real conclusion. It doesn't turn the story into a legend, a bittersweet fairy tale, nor into a completed tragedy. It lets it continue, but in a form that doesn't satisfy the narrative need for meaning. And above all, it forces us to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth, that this outcome does not stem from a wrong choice, but from a series of perfectly understandable choices. And that is precisely what makes it the ending that speaks to us, because the way Valerie arrives at it is extremely familiar. It's the way we make decisions when time is running out, information is incomplete, and the only thing that really matters seems to be moving forward. And only later, when it's too late, do we realize what's been left behind.